My name is Jake Henderson, and this is the story of how I watched my life's work crumble in the most satisfying way possible. But let me start from the beginning, because what happened to me could happen to anyone who trusts the wrong person. To continue listening to this beautiful and special story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Write your name and the city you're watching from so I can include a special shout out for you in an upcoming story. It was a Tuesday morning in Austin, Texas, when my world turned upside down. The humid air was thick with the smell of breakfast tacos from the food truck parked outside our office building on South Lamar. I remember that smell so clearly because it was the last normal thing I experienced before everything went to hell. I walked into TechFlow Solutions, the company I'd co-founded with my college roommate Marcus Williams 7 years earlier, expecting another typical day of meetings, code reviews, and the usual startup chaos. Our little company had grown from 2 guys in a garage to a 150-person operation valued at $50 million. We were on the verge of our biggest breakthrough yet, a revolutionary data management system that would change everything. Marcus was waiting for me in the conference room, along with our lawyer, Sarah Chen, and 3 board members I barely recognized. The moment I saw their faces, I knew something was wrong. Marcus wouldn't look me in the eye. The same guy who used to stay up all night with me, surviving on energy drinks and pure determination. "Jake, sit down," Marcus said, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "We need to talk." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. "We're restructuring the company, and your position is being eliminated." I stared at Marcus, waiting for the punchline. This had to be some kind of joke. "What are you talking about? I'm the CTO. I built half this company's core technology." Sarah slid a manila folder across the table. "Your severance package is quite generous, Jake. 6 months' salary and severance?" I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. "Marcus, what the hell is this?" For the first time that morning, Marcus looked directly at me. There was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. A cold calculation that made my blood run cold. "The board has decided to move in a different direction. Your management style isn't aligned with our vision anymore." Management style? I'd been managing the same team for 3 years. We'd never had a single complaint, never missed a deadline. Our employee satisfaction scores were through the roof. This wasn't about management style. This was about something else entirely. "I need to speak with Marcus alone," I said, my voice shaking. The room cleared out, leaving just the 2 of us. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Outside, I could hear the familiar sounds of Austin traffic, the distant music from a street performer, the normal world continuing while mine fell apart. 7 years, Marcus," I whispered. 7 years we built this together. Remember when we couldn't afford ramen and lived off free pizza from coding meetups? He didn't answer. He just stared at his hands. That night, I sat in my apartment overlooking Town Lake, trying to process what had happened. The city lights reflected off the water like broken glass, and I felt just as shattered. My phone buzzed constantly, messages from coworkers who'd heard the news, confusion and outrage from the team I'd built. But it was a text from Jenny, our lead developer, that made everything click into place. "Jake, something's not right. Marcus has been meeting with investors behind closed doors for weeks, and there's a rumor that he's been telling them he's the sole technical founder." Sole technical founder. The phrase made my stomach turn. I'd written 60% of our core codebase. The breakthrough algorithm that was about to make us millions? That was mine. The patent applications we'd filed last month, all based on my innovations. I pulled up my laptop and started digging. What I found in the next few hours made me physically sick. Marcus had been systematically rewriting our company's history, positioning himself as the technical genius, while painting me as just the business guy who'd gotten lucky. The worst part, our upcoming IPO documents listed Marcus as the primary technical founder. My contributions had been minimized, my role diminished. On paper it looked like I'd been just along for the ride. I called my brother David in California. He was a lawyer, and right now I needed someone I could trust completely. "Jake, slow down," he said after I'd explained everything in a rush. "This sounds like corporate fraud, but proving it will be complicated, especially if Marcus has been planning this for months. David, I helped build this company from nothing. I can't just walk away. I know, but you need to be smart about this. Don't do anything rash." But as I hung up the phone, I realized I was past the point of being smart. I was angry, betrayed, and ready to fight. The next morning, I decided to confront Marcus one last time. I found him in his office, feet up on his desk, talking on the phone, with what sounded like another investor call. "Marcus, we need to talk, now." He held up a finger, continuing his conversation. Yes, that's right. As the technical founder, I can assure you that our proprietary algorithms are completely secure and fully owned by the company. Proprietary algorithms, the ones I'd developed, the ones that existed only in my head and in code repositories that I'd personally secured. When he finally hung up, he looked at me with that same cold stare. Jake, I thought we were done yesterday. I want to know why, I said, sitting down across from him. Just tell me why. Marcus leaned back in his chair. You really want to know? Fine. You've been holding this company back for years. Your perfectionism, your need to control every technical decision, your inability to delegate. The board sees it. The investors see it. Everyone sees it, except you. That's bullshit, and you know it. When's the last time you let anyone else make a major technical decision? When's the last time you trusted the team to handle something important without micromanaging every detail? His words stung because there was a grain of truth in them. I had been protective of the technology, maybe overly so. But that was because I cared about quality, about doing things right. You know what the real problem is, Jake? Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Austin skyline. You never understood that this was always about business, not technology. Technology is just the tool. The real game is about money, power, and control. That's when he turned around and said the words that would haunt me for months. The truth is, I've been planning this for 2 years. I've been documenting every mistake you've made, every time you've clashed with the team, every decision that cost us time or money. I built a case against you, Jake, and now it's all ours. All ours, not all mine, all ours, because he wasn't doing this alone. Over the next week, I started to piece together the conspiracy. It wasn't just Marcus. It was Marcus, Sarah the lawyer, and 3 board members who'd been brought in specifically to push me out. They'd been planning this takeover for months, maybe years. I met with Jenny and 2 other senior developers at a coffee shop in East Austin, away from the office. The smell of roasted beans and breakfast tacos filled the air, but I couldn't eat. My stomach was in knots. Jake, they're asking us to sign new employment contracts, Jenny said, sliding a document across the table. Look at this clause. I read the highlighted section and felt my blood pressure spike. It was a non-compete agreement that would prevent any of us from working on similar technology for 3 years. But more importantly, it included a clause that retroactively assigned all past innovations to the company, effectively erasing my intellectual property rights. They can't do this, I said, but even as I spoke, I knew they could. With enough lawyers and the right paperwork, they could rewrite history. There's more, said Tom, our senior architect. Marcus has been telling the team that you've been stealing code, that you've been planning to start a competing company. He's been poisoning people against you. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. This wasn't just about money or control. Marcus was trying to destroy my reputation, my relationships, my entire professional life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my apartment, looking at the framed photos of TechFlow's early days. Marcus and me at our first trade show, grinning like idiots. The whole team celebrating our first major client. The night we hit our first $1 million in revenue, when Marcus and I stayed up until dawn planning our future. How had we gotten here? How had my best friend become my worst enemy? I'd always prided myself on being ethical, on doing business the right way. But as I sat in my apartment that night, staring at the legal documents that would essentially steal my life's work, I realized that sometimes the right way doesn't work. Marcus had been playing a different game all along, one where loyalty and friendship were just weaknesses to be exploited. If he wanted to play dirty, I could play dirty too. I opened my laptop and began typing. What I was about to do would violate every principle I'd ever held about business ethics, but Marcus had fired the first shot, and I was going to finish this war. The first thing I did was document everything, every email, every code commit, every patent application. I had 7 years of digital breadcrumbs that proved my role in building the company. But documentation wouldn't be enough. I needed leverage. That's when I remembered something Marcus had forgotten. I still had administrative access to our core systems. In his rush to push me out, he'd focused on the legal and financial aspects, but overlooked the technical details. I was still the system administrator for our most critical servers. I didn't plan to sabotage anything. I'm not that kind of person, but I could do something that would make Marcus's life very, very difficult. I started with our automated backup system. With a few keystrokes, I changed the encryption keys and moved our disaster recovery systems to a new provider. Then I updated our security protocols, changing access permissions in ways that would take weeks to untangle. Finally, I did something that I knew would drive Marcus absolutely insane. I triggered a complete security audit of our codebase. Every line of code would be reviewed, every algorithm would be documented, and every contributor would be properly credited. The audit would take months to complete, and during that time, no major changes could be made to our systems. Our IPO would be delayed indefinitely. The next morning, my phone was ringing before I was even fully awake. It was Marcus, and he was furious. "What the hell did you do to our system?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, genuinely enjoying the panic in his voice. "Jake, I swear to God if you've sabotaged anything, I haven't sabotaged anything. I simply initiated a security audit, which is standard procedure before any major corporate transition. I'm sure your new technical team can handle it." The silence on the other end was deafening. We both knew that Marcus didn't have a new technical team. He'd been planning to manage the technology himself, despite having barely coded in the past 3 years. "You're making a huge mistake, Jake. This is going to hurt you more than it hurts me. We'll see about that." Over the next few days, I watched from the sidelines as TechFlow descended into chaos. Without me there to manage the technical infrastructure, and with all their systems locked down by the security audit, the company ground to a halt. Client deliveries were delayed. The IPO was postponed. 3 major investors pulled out, spooked by the uncertainty. But the real vindication came when Jenny called me with news that made my day. "Jake, you need to hear this. Marcus tried to access the core algorithm codebase to make some changes for a client demo. He couldn't figure out how your optimization functions work. He's been in there for 6 hours, and he's completely lost." I felt a grim satisfaction. Marcus had always been more of a business guy than a technical person. But he'd been taking credit for my work for so long that he'd started to believe his own lie. 2 weeks after the security audit began, I got a call from Sarah Chen, the lawyer who'd been part of the conspiracy to push me out. "Jake, we need to talk. Can you come to the office?" "I don't think that's a good idea. I'm no longer an employee. Remember? This isn't about employment. This is about resolving some technical issues." I knew what this was about. They needed me to unlock the systems, to provide the documentation that would allow them to move forward. They were finally realizing that pushing me out had been a catastrophic mistake. When I arrived at the office, the atmosphere was completely different. The energy was gone, replaced by a sense of barely controlled panic. Employees were huddled in small groups, whispering. Half the development team had already quit. Marcus was waiting for me in the conference room, but he looked like a different person. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy that made him unable to sit still. "Jake," he said, not meeting my eyes, "we need to work something out." "I'm listening." "The audit has uncovered some complexities in our codebase. It appears that your contributions were more significant than we initially documented." More significant. That was lawyer speak for "we're screwed" without. "The board is prepared to offer you a consulting position to help resolve these technical issues. Very generous compensation, of course." I looked around the conference room, at the same table where they'd fired me 3 weeks earlier. The irony was almost too perfect. "What kind of consulting position?" "Chief Technical Advisor. You'd have full access to all systems, and you'd be able to direct the technical team as needed. So essentially, you want me to do my old job, but as a contractor instead of an owner." Marcus finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Desperation. "Jake, please. The company is hemorrhaging money. We've got clients threatening to sue, investors demanding answers. We need you." The silence stretched between us. Outside, I could hear the familiar sounds of Austin, traffic, construction, the distant music from a food truck. But inside this room, everything was quiet. I stood up slowly, taking one last look around the conference room, where I'd spent so many hours planning our future. The whiteboard still had my handwriting on it from our last technical planning session. Diagrams and equations that represented years of innovation. "You know what, Marcus?" I said, my voice surprisingly calm. 3 weeks ago, I would have done anything to save this company. I would have worked around the clock, sacrificed my health, my relationships, everything, just to make sure TechFlow succeeded. Marcus leaned forward, hope flickering in his eyes. "Jake, we can fix this. We can be partners again." "But that was before you looked me in the eye and told me that pushing me out was a game you'd been playing for 2 years. That was before you tried to steal my intellectual property and destroy my reputation. I picked up my jacket and headed for the door. You said it yourself. This was always about business, not technology. Well, here's a business lesson for you. When you betray the person who built your foundation, the whole structure collapses. Jake, wait. The security audit will be completed in about 6 weeks. Your systems will be unlocked, and you'll have full documentation of who contributed what to this company. I think you'll find it illuminating. I paused at the door and turned back one last time. Oh, and Marcus, you were right about one thing. I did learn something from all this. I learned that loyalty is a two-way street, and I learned that sometimes the best way to win is to walk away. As I left the office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Peace. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't angry anymore. 6 months later, I was sitting in a new office in downtown Austin, looking out at the same skyline but feeling like I was in a completely different world. The sign on the door read, Henderson Tech Solutions, and the small team of 5 brilliant developers I'd assembled was already working on innovations that would make TechFlow's technology look outdated. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenny. Saw the news about TechFlow. Thought you'd want to know, they're filing for bankruptcy next week. Marcus is looking for a job. I set the phone down and returned to my computer, where I was reviewing code for our latest breakthrough, a next-generation data management system that would revolutionize how companies handle information security. The technology was entirely mine, built from the ground up with no connection to my previous work. The irony wasn't lost on me. By trying to steal my contributions, Marcus had actually freed me to create something even better. By pushing me out, he'd eliminated the only person who could have saved his company. 3 days later, I got a call from David, my lawyer brother in California. Jake, you're not going to believe this. Marcus's lawyer called. He wants to meet with you about potentially licensing some of your old algorithms. I actually laughed for the first time in months. Tell him I'm not interested. I've got bigger things to focus on. Are you sure? This could be significant money. David, I spent 7 years building something with someone I trusted completely. When he betrayed that trust, I learned the most valuable lesson of my life. The only person you can really count on is yourself. I hung up and walked to the window, looking out at the Austin skyline. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably in another lawyer's office, trying to figure out how to salvage something from the wreckage of TechFlow. But I wasn't thinking about Marcus anymore. I was thinking about the future I was building, brick by brick, line of code by line of code. This time I was doing it right. This time I was doing it alone. The smell of breakfast tacos drifted up from the food truck below, and I realized I was hungry for the first time in months. I grabbed my jacket and headed downstairs, ready to start the next chapter of my life. Marcus had been right about one thing. This was always about business. But what he'd never understood was that the best business is built on trust, integrity, and the courage to walk away from anything that compromises those values. As I walked through the streets of Austin, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this whole nightmare began. Excitement about the future. TechFlow was finished. But Jake Henderson was just getting started.